Hello, everyone. This is Group C's final presentation on crisis communications. The members of this group are Kaylin, Indigo, Claire, Ariana, and Libby. Let's hop right into it. First of all, we have to define what crisis communications is, which it is the method of collecting, processing, and releasing information to stakeholders following a crisis. This has extreme importance in the aviation industry for two reasons. First, because aviation industry organizations need to repair their reputation following a crisis. And second of all, they need to maintain operational success following a crisis to protect their bottom line. This will be applied through crisis communications in two different ways. First, by exploring the practicality of applying crisis communications theories onto practices and policies in the industry, and then furthermore, understanding the relevant theories and how they can expand their understanding through aviation.
So first, we'll provide a theoretical framework of crisis communications as a whole. And to do so, we need to define what a crisis is. Researchers are somewhat split on the exact definition of a crisis, but everyone can agree that a situation that harms stakeholders in a physical, emotional, or financial way qualifies as a crisis. In crisis communications, there are two dominant theories. The first is situational crisis communication theory, also known as SCCT. In SCCT, crises are grouped into clusters, allowing communicators to use similar response strategies for each cluster. The first is the victim cluster, in which there is no responsibility for the crisis. The second is the accident cluster, in which the business is somewhat responsible for the crisis. And the third is the preventable cluster, in which the business is fully responsible for the crisis. SCCT offers three, maybe 3.5 strategies to respond to crises, depending on the amount of responsibility that the business has. The first is the deny strategy, in which the business says there is no crisis happening. The second is the diminish strategy, in which the business seeks to dampen the amount of panic surrounding a crisis. And the third is the rebuilding strategy, in which the business offers stakeholders a positive action to offset the crisis. Throughout it all, communicators can also rely on bolstering, a strategy which praises stakeholders and reminds them of an organization's past good deeds. The other dominant theory in crisis comms is image repair theory, IRT. Much like SCCT, image repair theory offers 5 different ways to respond to strategies. This includes denial, evasion, reducing offensiveness, corrective action, and mortification.
So that brings us to methodological considerations. This section focuses on methodology used in past literature to figure out which crisis communication strategies are most effective in aviation. Understanding how these studies were conducted, qualitative or quantitative, helps professionals know not just what works, but why and how to apply these key theories like SCCT and IRT in actual crisis situations. Next slide. Let's explore some case examples. One case example is the Boeing 737 MAX crisis. After a major crisis in Ethiopia, Boeing faced major public backlash. A qualitative study used thematic analysis to review the company's response and found that Boeing didn't communicate clearly or take enough accountability. This was seen as a missed opportunity to apply IRT, where being transparent and taking responsibility could have helped restore public trust. Next slide. Oh, sorry, if you could go back. Another study focused on fraud-related crises and used quantitative experiment across 17 different cases. It looked at things like how many direct quotes were used and how much background info was shared. The study found that messages with clear quotes and detailed info got a stronger response. So this gives professionals measurable data-backed insight into how to strengthen a crisis message. Next slide, please. There are even studies like the one that discusses most European airlines' crisis response to COVID-19, which used retrenchment, cutting costs to maintain operations, which matched SCCT guidelines for low responsibility crisis. And then another that explores how social media is used through the use of both surveys and expert interviews to analyze how passengers responded to crisis messaging. This study found people prefer quick, frequent updates. So time is of the essence. So in short, methodology supports the idea that SCCT helps guide the type of response based on how responsible the organization is for the crisis, and IRT highlights the importance of transparency and accountability.
Okay. So, taking a closer examination at Boeing 737 MAX crisis, SCCT, the first plane crash in 2018, was treated as an incident, independent incident, and it was more so in the accidental cluster, suggesting pilot error or poor maintenance was to blame. They avoided taking accountability for it. In 2019, with a nearly identical crash, Boeing's narrative shifted. Evidence showed that they knew of the design flaws in the MCAS system and they hadn't properly disclosed or addressed those issues. The crisis now clearly fell into the preventable cluster with high responsibility attributed to Boeing. Next slide. Now examining the IRT framework, Boeing initially denied design flaws, blamed pilots, deflected responsibility to regulators and airlines. It later sought to reduce backlash by highlighting its safety record, then took corrective actions, including grounding the aircraft, updating MCAS, and leadership changes. Eventually, Boeing apologized to the public and offered compensation to the victims' families. Next slide. Thinking of some gaps in the research, these frameworks were made from a Western individualistic point of view, overlooking cultural differences. Another lapse in the research is these different frameworks did not take into consideration crisis communication in the wake of digital age and social media.
Crisis communication is a big deal. Researchers say two things matter most: speed and honesty. If an airline waits too long or gives unclear information, it can cause fear and confusion, and people may stop trusting that airline. Next. After the 9/11 attacks, United Airlines shared information on their website quickly to keep people informed and calm. In 2021, when an engine failed mid-flight, they grounded similar planes and released a safety-focused statement to the public. American Airlines also responded fast after a mid-air collision in 2025. Their CEO recorded a video sharing sympathy for victims and gave updates on the situation. Next. Boeing's response after two fatal crashes was slow and unclear. The crashes were linked to a system called MCAS, but Boeing didn't explain it right away. That delay made things worse. The public, the media, and government officials like the FAA took control of the story. Boeing lost trust in and the 737 MAX was grounded around the world. Next. Not all researchers agree on how honest companies should be. Um, but even with those risks of lawsuits, panic, or blame, research says that being honest in a clear and thoughtful way still helps in the long run, especially in industries where people's safety is involved. Next. The research shows a few strategies that work again and again. Speak early, be clear, and use many ways to get the message out, like social media, websites, and press releases. Next.
Overall, we found both several key findings and recommendations for future actions. First, we found that several strategies can be used to, alongside the case studies, further understand which responses would be more successful, with timeliness, clarity, and accountability all being correlated to better responses, while delayed action or lackluster responses often caused additional crises due to backlash. Additionally, future actions could be recommended, with organizations being able to replicate successful crisis communication responses made in the past, while looking at failures in past communication responses as a warning and as a guidance to avoid these strategies and to pick more successful ones. Thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, please let us know in the comments.